listening to Not Good Enough, an inadequate response to inadequate responses. My name is Mitch Alexander.
I'm Tom Lang.
I'm Tom McLean.
And I'm Evie.
We've got Alzak here as well, fact-checking, getting notes and keeping us all in line. Top of this show, we're going to issue a correction yet again, our second one ever.
Yet again, we're doing pretty well.
Before this, literally every single thing we've said has been 100% factually true, except this other thing. Last week we were talking about the Mardi Gras protest that was shut down by the New South Wales police, and we were laughing about how they tried to shut down the Liberal float, the Liberal Party float. We said that their float was the Endeavour, and it turned the ship from colonies. Doesn't matter. Essentially, that was really bad and funny because it was bad. But it turns out the Endeavour was the protesters' float, which means it's good because it's sarcastic and ironic and funny. Yeah. So big ups to the Department of Homo Affairs. They're amazing. They're amazing.
Pretty good.
And we can all do that classic thing of, but it's just the kind of thing they would do.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, reporting on the day was shithouse, and we finally got our facts together probably like 12 hours after we recorded.
Yeah,
so,
that's always the case.
As it happens. But in the news, New South Wales has no active fires.
So what does that mean? Does that mean no fires?
Yep.
Oh,
yeah, no.
All the fires are out.
Yeah, we're up.
In New South Wales.
Nicely done.
Queensland, still very much on fire. And the rest of the country is still pretty much on fire. But it is still all contained. It's going out and it's that's pretty good.
So the fire situation is getting better. It's in the getting better stage.
Yes. Like I said last time, we still have a month of risk because March is still actually pretty bad for bushfires, but we're going into it with no active fires in New South Wales, very much contained fires in the rest of the country. We seem to be on top of it, especially because billions and billions of dollars are hopefully going to the bushfire fund. Oh, wait, they might not be. We'll get into that a little bit later on probably. And we're recording today on International Women's Day.
Just want to put out that this podcast respects women.
We're getting an awful lot of questions about how much we respect women, given the fact that we always talk about just how much we respect women.
Yeah, I just want to point out that when it comes to respecting women, we let our woman say it.
So, Evie, tell us about International Women's Day. The interesting thing I found...
Fuck, Evie, that's a spot-on impression of Mitch.
God damn it.
Is this meta? I'm not sure. So we're reporting live from International Women's Day. I'm sure that every year you might have seen some sort of horrible response from a corporation about how they're respecting women harder than ever. So this year the award goes to Shell. Incredible. Just putting an apostrophe in and cool.
So,
we've done respect for women now.
We're going to put this in the show notes on the website, and you have to go to our website, notgoodpod.com, go to this episode's show notes and find this video. It is one of the most incredible black pill moments I've ever had of a corporation just not even trying to get the progressive dollar. For context, essentially this ad has multiple different shots of multiple different women of multiple different
it's very
ages.
intersectional.
It's got all the
We got
people.
one of all of them.
They got stock footage from all of the categories.
Yeah. Of just women smiling, saying things like, she'll be heard and she'll be president and stuff like that.
She'll be right.
Yeah. The Aussie ones are like, she'll be right. But eventually the ad transforms for a little bit, and then there's just like, she will. And then it goes to a white screen with red writing, and it's she will. And then it contracts to she'll. And then that gets rid of that, and it goes to Shell. And then there's the Shell logo. And that's literally fucking it.
That's the whole thing.
It's just someone was like, Shell. Shield. Oh, we're progressive now.
I think the brainstorming session for that is they got that big whiteboard and they wrote the word women, cloud, and then they went, okay, let's take lunch. That's it. Women,
who
Shell.
are we going to focus on this International Women's... Women.
You know what women bloody love? Women. Put them in the ad, put on the logo, martinis.
Yeah, there might have been some do women love petrochemicals? No. All right, what about we just focus on women?
Yeah.
What is the general concept? Yes.
Following the current trajectory, it's just next year, a BP oil executive, he's just on camera, he's just in his pajamas, he's just got out of bed, and he says, it's International Women's Day. And then he sets fire to a seabird, and that's the end.
But that seabird was a woman.
Yeah.
Probably. It's hard to tell with seabirds. We reckon we can get away with saying it was a woman.
Probably a woman.
So, so this is all fucked anyway. We all know that the like petrochemicals and multinational corporations getting involved in progressive movements is bullshit, and we will probably be talking more and more about that as the year goes on. But what many people may not actually know is that International Women's Day is also known as International Working Women's Day.
So it started off as a socialist unionist women's event.
Hell yeah.
Just as a quote, just so you have a little background, is that the very first observation of our National Women's Day proved so successful that Women's Day became generally accepted as an annual socialist holiday. And along with May Day, the day stood for new hopes and new ideals, the abolition of wage slavery and sex slavery, and the coming of a freer, better, and happier manhood and womanhood.
Wait, so it was primarily a socialist kind of working thing, and they just deleted the socialist bit and just tried to make it women.
That's right.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Just remember that every time you see a new corporate feminist ad, and just remember what it used to be.
It's the same thing because it's Labor Day tomorrow as well, which is again a socialist holiday done in celebration of achieving the working
rights
hours. It's just a labor rights celebration, and that's nobody talks about Labor Day like that. Just like it's a day off for fun for no reason.
Don't wear
There's
white
nothing
after
being
it.
historical commemorated here on Labor Day. Just a regular day off. No, it was a day that when the labor unionists won so hard that they were just like, all right, so give us the weekend. And the bosses were like, all right. And they're like, and 5 days a week. Okay. And give us a public holiday to commemorate it. Fine. So, like, imagine that happening in contemporary society. Imagine a labor movement winning so hard that the government instituted a public holiday commemorating it. Like,
Can't relate.
imagine how, like, serious of a win that would be to, like, even get somebody to say labor rights are good. Like, much less to commemorate it with an annual public holiday. Like, Labor Day is intense. So it's just as we come into Labor Day and the socialist history of Women's Day, like, hell yeah.
Yeah.
These are more important than fucking Easter or Christmas. Like, a kid got born or an adult died.
This changed our life. This changed the structure of our life.
Yeah.
A kid got born or an adult died.
Yeah.
Can't remember who.
This would never happen with something like, I mean, you take Anzac Day, for example, which was formed to celebrate friggin' people fighting in World War I.
Oh, yeah, the government murdered a bunch of, like, young men.
Yeah. Now, the way we've celebrated that, or the themes around it have shifted slightly to be less about the horrors of war and more about, hey, war and nationalism are pretty rad.
Respect our troops.
But if it went to being like, hey, let's just celebrate young guys and not, like, a war thing, you'd be like, what happened to the war thing? They'd be like, no, it's Young Guy Day.
Young guys.
It's International Anzac Day. Yeah, or if it turned into just like, like a celebration of like nice bickies and good blokes.
Right.
Like,
Two up.
What? What?
Yeah, it's the historical thing where there was just like this cool girl, her name was Anne, and there's like this dude, Zach, and they were just like, it's nice. Nice to think about them. And
Like
women
biscuits and two up.
just doing stuff.
Anyway, so that's your take-home homework for this episode. Go have a read about the origins of International Women's Day and see what it used to be like.
Yeah, go kick a boss's ass so hard that he declares it a public holiday.
Weird Al is a coward.
So, I'm going to move into coronavirus stuff.
We're not health experts.
No,
None of us.
Next
We are
segment.
not going to tell you what to do about coronavirus.
we're
I'm
not
sorry.
even particularly healthy. So we will give you some links to people who do know what they're talking about. Please listen to those people. Don't listen to anyone on TV that is not specifically qualified in that area real hard. Don't listen to politicians unless they're directly quoting health experts. Just listen to the health experts. They're out there. They're broadcasting very loudly.
If they're a doctor, you're allowed to listen to them if it's medical doctor, and you have to ask.
Unless it's Missy Higgins' dad. In which, so what we want
actually-
He was thrown under the bus. He's
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I
wasn't.
did say that.
That was a blow up.
So just for a bit of context, there was accusations that a doctor was going to work while he had coronavirus and he had the symptoms of it. How dare he? And it turns out it was Missy Higgins' dad.
that was just a weird
Irrelevant.
Okay. But yeah, it turns out he had like super mild symptoms, didn't even qualify for what the medical experts were saying you should get tested for. So he didn't test himself until he did. And it's like, turns out he had a type of flu, which is coronavirus.
Yeah.
But
So
did it leave him with a scar? No.
No. Okay.
no, no.
Sorry, we're cutting.
No.
But yeah, then the
Remember that, Missy Higgins.
Lang. Get the fuck out.
I've had too
No,
much caffeine.
he left a card and a bar of soap and a scrubbing brush next to a note that says you've got coronavirus.
Yes. Everyone's so fucking proud of themselves. We want to bring up coronavirus, obviously, because we are an Australian podcast, and it would be remiss of us and a bit weird to not talk about how we're the stupidest fucking country on the planet, full of morons. Because we had people fighting over toilet paper and hoarding toilet paper, but we do have like a reason for bringing it up. Essentially, it ties into all of our bluster about workers' rights and union rights and all the rest of that sort of stuff as we sort of get into it. But just for some context for those that may not know, any international listeners and whatnot.
Who hasn't heard of coronavirus?
No, what's been happening in Australia with the Australian population? We've had toilet paper shortages for
Like a week or two?
but
Yeah, like the last fortnight.
for maybe no good reason that I can see. I can't even see a good I can't find a meme that's exploded on Boomer Twitter.
No, it's technically it is a good reason when you think about how it started. So how it started, someone at BuzzFeed, we'll put a link in the notes for this as well. They figured out through page views and click views that Channel 7 had originally put a video of like just two people just loading up their trolleys full of toilet paper with no context saying, oh, there's panic buying happening. Not saying don't do this, just saying this is happening.
Toilet
And
paper
so-
is being bought a lot.
Exactly. So everyone who's looking at this clip is going, oh shit, people are panic buying toilet paper. I better go and get some just in case as well. So there's been like a dual effect then of people trying to buy toilet paper in case it runs out, and then like a whole bunch of people buying toilet paper in order to flip it. And so now we just have just both of them just going nuts and fighting each other and tasering each other. And
Yeah, someone was almost stabbed.
yeah,
It's a classic.
rules.
It's a classic bubble though, because people are buying toilet paper because other people are buying toilet paper, and if everyone else is buying toilet paper, you don't want to be stuck with
I
no
wanna buy
toilet
toilet paper.
But
Yeah.
when you go to the supermarket, or at least when I went to my supermarket, every other aisle fully stocked.
Yeah.
Australia is fine. Like there is every kind of fruit and veg. There's 50 different kinds of soda water. You've got all of everything you could ever possibly buy. And then
been
you
some-
get to the toilet paper aisle and it looks like a fucking zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
There's nothing.
There's been some sellouts. This is at my local shops at least, and I've seen some other pictures of pasta and rice selling out, which is like, okay, that's a bit more serious. But there's also a really funny one of not all of the pastas. Like I've seen people observing on Twitter of just like the sort of the shitty pastas of like, oh, people don't like butterfly, do they?
I did notice comedian James McCann also posted a thing where he was in Adelaide and posted footage of the entire toilet roll aisle, both sides of it, completely bare, except as he panned the camera around, there was still the wet wipe ones with the antibacterial wipes. All of them were fully stocked because people don't like wet stuff on their bottoms.
On Tom Tanuki's Twitter, he was observing that he went to an Asian grocery and they had tons of toilet paper.
But so it's worth bringing up, like what we've already sort of hinted at, is that the panic buying isn't coming from any actual need, because otherwise we would have had like shortages well before we knew that there was a problem with it. But if you're panic buying like carloads of toilet paper, you've got the money to buy lots of toilet paper, but a lot of people in this country don't actually do that. So part of the reason why this is a problem, and the part of the reason why this is like, I suppose, newsworthy for us, but also just in terms of like what panic buying actually means, is that for no good reason, not as a response to coronavirus and not even as a response to actual supply or demand issues, people are now constricting supply of a product that people need that they now can't get because they're too poor to get it, which... Again, I don't have the exact data for this, but if you continue to hear about wage stagnation in this country for years and years, precarious employment, unemployment going up, the gig economy not working, then I reckon that's going to have some flow-on effect when people will go, oh, I really need toilet paper. Oh, fuck, I can't get toilet paper until Thursday and it's now all sold out.
Yeah.
It's effectively, it's hoarding is the problem. It's not the buying, it's the hoarding. And it's the same with owning multiple properties or friggin' anything else. If you are buying lots of stuff to the point where other people can't buy the stuff they basically need to survive, then that's bad.
There's also a
It's
thing.
fucking selfish.
I think there's also a thing of there's the panic buying is due to, I would say, the fact that everyone's pretty aware that the government's totally incapable of managing a crisis properly. Like,
Yeah.
If we had a government that hadn't spent the last 20 years just grabbing everybody by the throat and saying, you can't trust us with anything.
It's everyone for themselves.
Then when a disaster hits, you'd be like, oh, well, look, the government has these things under control. I'm sure that if the supply chain gets interrupted, there will be some program in place to make sure that people get toilet paper and staples and, that sort of thing.
Look at how quickly they responded to bushfires and didn't deny it for months.
Right, yeah. So the fact that, like, that sort of stuff is in jeopardy is like, well, there's one thing that we know for sure is that the government won't have it under control. Like, maybe we don't need the toilet paper yet, but I know that if we do need it, I won't get it from them.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
And so it is that selfish decision of like hoarding it. But I think that part of the panic is coming from the fact that the government really has proven themselves incapable.
And rich people know this better than anyone else, which is why they've already started doing their own kind of hoarding when it comes to climate change. They hoard houses, they hoard land, they hoard all sorts of resources because they know, they are in that mentality of every man for themselves. And I'm going to rely on hoarding all these for myself so I survive instead of anyone else.
Mostly importantly, they hoard money.
Yes, well, exactly.
It's the reason that real estate signage is called a hoarding is.
But
Sorry.
so on the idea of, like, obviously wage stagnation plays into this sort of stuff and fears about panic and whatnot. There is also the idea with, like, everyone's heard about how we're going to be you've got to self quarantine if you get coronavirus or there's a risk of it, and you've got to be, like, staying away from people and whatnot. And that has ramifications for, like, the global economy or the Australian economy, not because of this idea that, things are gonna like slow down because big business can't get going, but because, again, we have transitioned into a gig economy. We've transitioned away from healthy wages. We've transitioned away from strong labor rights, which means that if you have to self-quarantine for a while, and if you are on casual employment, you might not have a job when you go back. If you don't have a strong union presence at your work, they might try to rat fuck you on how to take that leave. They might insist that you take annual or sick leave for what you need to do.
Or unpaid leave.
Yeah, I mean, there's already stories of that happening. We've got the man with coronavirus ignored instructions to self-isolate pending test results, instead working several shifts at Hobart's Grand Chancellor Hotel. Like, yeah, because if he doesn't fucking go to work, he
get
can't
fined.
make rent.
If you're a
hoard toilet paper.
if you're a hospo worker or an Uber driver, or honestly the people in society who come in contact with the most people, they're the most unstable employees.
Yeah, they're the ones we need to protect.
They can't call in and say, "Oh, I'm a bit worried," and they go, and Uber says, "Sure, we'll make sure that you are allowed to stay inside."
Yeah.
And we have these situations where people are getting screwed over. It drives me crazy to think that we're actually better than most, like than America in this matter.
Yeah.
At least we have sick leave. At least we have, like, some sort of idea of workers' protection still in place.
Which is worth noting that we got them because we fought for them.
Exactly.
These aren't given from God, and the Liberal Party has time and time again tried to erode them over and over.
It's not benevolent.
Imagine if there was the $7 copay was in, and we've now got a potential pandemic, like, traveling around the world. No, we really need to test people. If you feel sick, be sure to go to your doctor. Like Lang said, the most likely people to come in contact with more people are the people earning less. They're also going to look at a $7 copay and go, maybe.
Yeah, I'm going to risk it.
Yeah, I've only got a sniffle. I've only got something else.
There is a huge difference between a medical appointment that costs $0 and a medical appointment that costs even $1.
Yep.
Because even $1 is suddenly some money that you have to spend.
Yep.
And if you're poor and you go, it's $1, fuck it.
That's
You
a
don't
whole
wanna
can
have
of
to spend
tomatoes.
that dollar. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember, I'm only, by the grace of God, lucky enough to not worry about single dollars now, but I distinctly remember a time not that long ago where I was looking at the difference between home brand bread or home brand milk, because that was like, that's the $1.50 to $2, and which one can I go without for the next few days until I get paid again? There are so many people like that.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been there personally because I have the fortune of being from a very middle-class family, but I remember in my 20s...
Scum!
Yeah. I remember in my 20s, I had friends who were, like, skipping job interviews and stuff because they couldn't afford the tram fare to... They think they're just like, I have to either, like, fare evade and risk a, $150 fine that I
Absolutely.
can't even afford the $3 tram ticket, much
Yeah.
less a $150 fine. So it's just like every job interview you go to, you arrive at nerved out of your brain because you've just spent half an hour on a tram being like, if I get caught,
Yeah.
I'm fucked. That of course people are going to go to work. That's the sort of economy that we live in.
And to the rest of society, it might not seem important whether or not that one person has a shitty day because their car ran out of fuel because they can only fill it up $2 at a time. But when most of the population that can carry a virus is on the poorer end of the scale, like, let's be honest here, rich people, the people who have no worries getting private doctors, they form a very small part of the population. And a virus doesn't look around a population and go, oh, I'm going to pick and choose. No, they're all bodies.
It should, though.
Okay, we'll get to that.
We could engineer a virus to target the rich.
And if you structured your economy so that most of the bodies that can carry a virus are unable to go to the hospital or unable to take time off work, you've created a population which is specifically really good at carrying a virus around.
Yeah.
You look at also some of the work that the Australian Unemployed Workers Union has been doing, shout out to them always, with interrogating Centrelink about what happens to unemployed people if they are suspecting that they have coronavirus.
Yep.
Because one of the things that happens if you're on New Start with Centrelink is you have regular job-seeking obligations that you have to meet. Otherwise, your payments get cut off. You have to be going out and going to these like training sessions to figure out how to get a job, which are basically useless. But so I was looking, Jeremy Foxton was talking about how Centrelink hasn't made any guarantees about job seeker obligations if you're under quarantine for New Start. Like, he was pressuring Centrelink to say you won't have to meet your obligations to that if you're under quarantine. And Centrelink was like, okay, you know, under the sort of pressure that we're getting here, yes, we can say that for the 14 days, you won't have to meet those obligations. And then after that, if you have a doctor's certificate, you can get out of it again. And he's like, so people have to go out and get a doctor's certificate now. Like, even these concessions that they can make under pressure, that they're uninterested in slowing the rate of the spread of this disease if it means letting up on poor people at all.
Yeah.
Yep.
And they're always so spurious about when they disconnect people's payments for those obligations too. So this is like, you just know that now they've said this verbal guarantee, okay, yeah, we won't cut it off for 14 days. It's absolutely going to happen. It happened for the bushfires as well.
Oh, God.
They cut off payments for so many people they can't get back on.
Yeah.
So I think before we get into that, which is what we also want to talk about today, because holy shit, this fucking government, I think it's just worth like taking again, like we usually do, a step back from the minutiae of the little bits of these arguments and just sort of make a mention, and this is my own sort of like, theory and hobby horse on the panic buying of coronavirus. But what we're seeing, this hoarding and the panic response, and if you've seen the footage as well, people are stressed in the shopping centres. People are having fights with each other because all of a sudden it's my toilet paper and what if I don't have it? And they're freaking out. And I think a big part of that is because like we are already in large part an anxious and scared society. We're an anxious and scared society because of things like wage stagnation and precarious employment and unemployment and all those sort of things like that. Now, when we had the bushfires, and I remember like the Brisbane floods that I was involved in that, people don't panic in the same way. And I think that's because when you have a threat or a problem facing your society or your community, if you can see it or you can control it, then you can band together with people to do something. So when you see like these big fires, it's like, well, we're all in this together versus that. Or when you've got control, you can go, well, we all need to do this exact thing. But at the moment with coronavirus, we can neither see it nor control it, and we're already anxious. So that's perfect melting pot for everyone to just freak the fuck out and melt down.
I think it's also that something like a virus can affect individual people. A bushfire affects an entire town. Sure, it affects, some houses in certain places a bit more than others, but it's going to affect you and your neighbors pretty much the same. You're on the same side. But a coronavirus affects individuals. It obviously spreads through a society, but I could get a virus and my neighbor doesn't. And
well, that's what I mean by you can't see it. That's that effect, because it will affect the local shops and whatnot. But the thing is, you can't see it in the same way, so it doesn't work. So all I'm saying is to fight coronavirus, join your union.
But the thing with people's approach to infectious diseases, especially ones that they've had no prior sort of knowledge or idea of how to deal with before, people like the decay of the benefit of something like vaccination has disappeared over the years because people don't realize it's a communal benefit.
We're in this together.
You're getting vaccinated. It's not just for yourself not getting the disease. It's to protect other people who are more susceptible too. And that comes to any sort of infectious disease. People have sort of forgotten that idea that when you don't hoard and you quarantine yourself, that's to protect everyone. it's a communal benefit.
There's a thing about the nature of a virus compared to a bushfire as well that I don't really know if there's any sort of actionable thing to come out of it, but the fact that it separates people rather than bringing them together. So if you've got a bushfire that affects your next door neighbor but not you,
Don't
you're like,
go down to the beach
oh,
together."
mate, come over, I'll cook your dinner, like, we'll make sure you're taken care of. If you've got a next door neighbor who's affected by the virus and not you, you're like, stay the fuck away from me.
Yeah.
And this is an interesting thing. I think the progress of Western culture and the Western economy, and maybe the rest of the world as well, over the last 100 years has been one of increasing individualization. Like the whole neoliberalism, capitalism thing, when it's running well, it tricks us all into thinking that we're individuals. I go to work, I earn my money, I buy my food, I live in my house. And that all runs smoothly because as long as I can go to the supermarket and there's a thing there for me to buy, I can pretend that as long as I'm fine, and everybody else is doing their thing and they're fine, but they don't affect me.
Yeah.
And we're becoming increasingly isolated just because of that, but it is an illusion. And at the point where you get something like a disaster like this, it could be an economic crash, it could be bushfires or a virus or climate change, that illusion gets broken and it suddenly forces people to face that uncomfortable realization that, oh no, we actually live in a society. Whether or not we want to, we are part of a society, and whether we live or die depends on the health of that society. And you can put it off for as long as you want, and you can try and keep society out and have gated communities, but you're not growing food in your gated community. You're not building a civilization in your gated community. We all rely on each other. And if you don't have a healthy society, like we're seeing in places like America, to a lesser extent Australia, America has created an absolute powder keg for something like the coronavirus by destroying all of the aspects of a functioning communal society. That's my big thought for the day.
Yeah, join your union, wash your hands. I think this is McLean sort of stuff, but the Matthias Coleman shit and with Penny Wong.
It's not even like a talking point. It's just a thing that I want to point people to.
Yeah.
Is like, watch that, like those
Exchange.
bits of Senate estimates, like the Murray Watt stuff and the Penny Wong stuff, because it's pretty cathartic just watching the sort of Liberal Party stooges squirm around under direct question.
Yeah,
of
who was
their
that
own
green
corruption.
senator from WA? Holy shit. She fucking rules. She's literally.
Oh, yeah, Rachel Stewart.
Rachel Stewart.
Yeah.
She's
amazing.
amazing.
It was so good.
She
Someone asked
she
a
should have been
question.
the leader.
Someone asked her a question and she just go, "Excuse me? Excuse me? What is what?" And takes the glass off. Is what you're telling me? Like, oh,
Yeah, she's
Do we
sorry,
stan?
do we-
It sounds like we stan.
I would
We do stand.
readily stand Rachel Stewart. So yeah, we just want to talk about some corruption stuff for a little while. There's not really any new major developments that we have a whole ton of stuff to talk about, but there have been lots and lots of little developments because Senate Estimates was on over the last week or so, which is basically where senators get to sit on a chair at a table and it's sort of slightly elevated above the people that they're questioning, and the people that they're questioning are just like sort of various stooges from various different departments and occasionally other senators, and they have to tell the truth. And if they don't know or don't want to answer it, they have to take it on notice, which is a way of saying like, I'll have to get back to you on that, but it's being used as a cover-up
Do they
pretty
get back
regularly.
to them?
Well, no.
Okay.
yeah, that's what I was going to ask. When someone takes something on notice, what is that supposed to mean officially?
I'll
it is
take that
meant
as a
to-
comment.
No. I'll
it's
take it on
more
notice
that,
is
but-
like, oh, now you've given us notice that we have to provide an answer to that.
Yeah.
There is some legislation around like how long they have, but they have, I don't know the exact amount of time.
12 and a half years.
But they have a fair amount of time to do it, and it's very much a pattern in the Liberal Party or in the current government, presumably other governments as well, of leaving it as long as is humanly possible.
Right.
Right.
And then just sort of like
Hoping
dumping
people
a
forget.
bunch of shitty reports like, weeks later.
Yep.
The estimates are over. Yeah, so there's basically the estimate stuff has just been a lot of different senators interviewing stooges about various things. The main people to look at in that area are Penny Wong, who we've spoken about in the podcast before, but less flatteringly. But when she's in estimates, she's genuinely great to watch.
Penny Wong is, in my mind, like sort of like the Elizabeth Warren of Australia. at least early Elizabeth Warren, where it's just like she's a fucking Labor stooge, and that automatically means you shouldn't be in any position of power whatsoever. But if we have to have either Labor or Liberal in power, we may as well have Penny Wong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's her and Murray Watt are like Fine.
She's at least trying to do some stuff within the constraints of her party.
Yeah, you're not going into the like lowest layer of hell. We'll send you into like one of the easier ones that's like, look, yes, you are a major figurehead of the party that instituted the refugee concentration camps, but on the other hand, you said some mean things to Matthias Coleman the other day, so you know.
Yeah, so credit to Penny Wong where it's due. She straight out accused Matthias Coleman and the coalition of covering up corruption. Matthias Coleman is the leader of the Liberal Party in the Senate, and she refused to withdraw a statement that Scott Morrison is, quote, up to his neck in the sports rod, because there's been evidence that's come out that Scott Morrison, our Prime Minister, is just directly involved in moving funds around to sports clubs that were not eligible for the grants.
Yeah.
It's just, this is what blows my fucking mind. It's like when we talk about how journalists should be asking questions more than twice to get an answer, politicians should just straight up be going, hey, you're lying, or hey, you're corrupt, or hey, you're involved. This idea that civility and purity politics has meant that we have to sort of go, now it seems like there's a potential for some people in your party might be corrupt. No, just hang him by the fucking feet. You're corrupt.
That's what the beauty of estimates is this week, is that sort of conversation has been going down. There's been some pretty like really, really obvious stuff about that sort of civility thing. So this was another video that came out. So this is Murray Watt questioning about the sports rort scandal, and a Liberal MP called Anne Ruston tried to shut that line of questioning down by claiming that the word rorts was unparliamentary and he had to take a different line of questioning.
I mean, I would say rorts are unparliamentary. That's the point. And
you don't want people to say rorts, stop rorting.
I think you're in a good position. I think we're in a good position if the government is now trying to argue this point by just getting into the semantics. It's like, look, we'll talk about the obvious corruption and lying that went on, but first we need to figure out how we're talking about it.
We've also got the Angus Taylor scandal where his office really fucking looked like it forged some documents to take down Angus Taylor's wife's political rival, Clover Moore. So the AFP was recruited to investigate that scandal, and they dropped it. And it turns out, and this is the details that are coming out of estimates, that they didn't interview Clover Moore, they didn't interview Angus Taylor, they just accepted it and then they dropped it. And Nick McKim accused the AFP of executing a cover-up, which really fucking looks like they did. And Marissa Payne said, if you're impugning the Australian Federal Police, I would suggest you think very carefully about that. Like, fucking looks like Nick McKim's going to get investigated soon. But yeah, he was like, yeah, I have thought about it very carefully and I stand by my comment. Like, yeah, it's not like dishonorable to impugn the honor of the Australian Federal Police if they're transparently fucking engaged in cover-ups.
Or if you think they're engaged in a cover-up and you say, hey, could they be engaged in a cover-up? Hard to say that in a way that doesn't in some way imply you might believe that they've done something wrong. Yeah.
And just a final addition to the ongoing Angus Taylor saga as well, just shout out to the AIMN.com. They have an article that basically adds up all the costs of and when Angus Taylor entered Parliament in September 2013, and any companies and organisations associated with his family. It tallies up to $93 million worth of federal and state government funds that they've amassed over time.
Nice.
That's a nice little.
So he's his own personal rorting machine.
And that's presumably
allegedly.
That's unparliamentary, Evie.
And that's presumably not counting all the money he actually semi-legitimately earns through his job.
Yeah,
or
it's not his salary.
It's not his salary.
Oh yeah, an MP salary is huge.
Yeah, the direct quote is, from the time Angus Taylor entered Parliament in September 2013, companies and organisations the Taylor family have managed, directed or are directly associated with have benefited from over $93,515,673 in fed and state government funds, which leads me to believe that there's some credibility to that because you wouldn't make such a specific claim on the number. The 73 is what got me. It was like
they got a
Steam sale was on, and
So that's $93 million. Using my benchmark from the other episode as $10 million is $100,000 a year for 100 years. That's a very luxurious entire human life. I'm just going to call $10 million a human life.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
that's 9 human lives, fully funded.
Are you suggesting that Angus Taylor has murdered 8 other human lives?
I am saying indirectly, yes.
Or at least he bought them.
And in the, I suppose, the last little bit of like just general corruption within our state, and as it rots from the inside out or from the head, as the worst quote ever given to the leader of the opposition, the corruption from a fish goes from the fish's head to the bottom of its tail, and this
starts at the head, and this has gone
to the top of the
all
head,
the way to the top.
Yeah,
from the head.
The actual quote is a fish rots from the head, and this rot goes straight to the top. And it's the
nothing.
most
It's nothing.
confused metaphor.
You're holding the fish upside down from
It's nothing.
the tail.
Yeah.
Corruption starts from the head, and this government's corruption goes straight to the top. No, it should come straight from the top. If anyone from the fucking Labor Party is listening, you can PayPal me the correction, $50. Please, for the love of God, fix that god-awful quote. It means nothing. It means nothing, and every time Albanese says it, he thinks he's being profound. There's a slight smirk on his face. It's like, oh, this is my winning strategy. It's not. You've got a sentence with a comma in it, you fuckhead. 3 words.
Are you expecting Albanese to do your emotional labour?
Yes. PayPal me. But
The whole thing of when you use a metaphor, there's like, what do you think you're talking about? Are you just like saying some words, or do you have like an understanding of the I was in a meeting a while ago and somebody was talking about a problem that had come up, and they're like, no, we've barely even begun to tip the iceberg here. I couldn't participate in the meeting for like a full 20 minutes because I was like, what do you imagine an iceberg? How do you tip? So we put turning the...
It's like it's like a witch hunt, and the witches didn't even do it.
Fuck. But shout out to Last Step. McLean, do you want to actually take this away? Because this is sort of your, you hit on this and mentioned her last step, but we've got a recurring character.
Oh yeah, our extra who's been promoted to guest star. So she's Glennis Beecham, the head of one of the health departments, who was in the previous week's episode for having resigned quite suddenly and destroyed a bunch of notes relating to the sports rot scandal. She is embroiled in another scandal, having basically pressured the University of Melbourne to silence a staff member onto an investigation that the staff member revealed that basically there was a vulnerability in one of the medical systems that, even though it had removed identifiable data from the patient records, the data was still very much identifiable. So it's possible to like imagine somebody's location data and say like, this is Mitch Alexander's location data. And if I take his name off it, you're like, oh, it could be anybody's location data who lives at that address and goes to that gym and works at that office and blah, 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 blah.
And has that birthday was one of the ones that were on there. And spouses.
And kids' birthdays.
Yeah, like it had so much identifying information, but they just essentially went like, oh no, this could be any M. Alexander.
Yeah. There's very much, when they talk about de-identified data, usually the person who's claiming that it's de-identified has taken the name field off. De-identified data needs to go through so much more to be de-identified, and they did not do that.
Just to emphasise the seriousness of the allegations, it was affecting 2.5 million Australians. And the lack of de-identifying it properly meant that their entire PBS and Medicare history was exposed.
It wasn't also back to like 86 or 83.
That's
so
right,
like
yeah.
Before I was born.
And it got to the point where the professor involved, Vanessa Teague, who wasn't being taken seriously, she actually got to the point where she said, I've identified a journalist in these records.
That's right.
If you don't respond, I'm going to go to the journalist.
Yeah, you have 30 days to respond, or I give the journalist their own records and tell them how I got them.
Yeah.
So that's the situation there is, so Vanessa Teague found this information, was like, hey, there's been a significant data breach. We've got this massive security hole. We should do something about it. And a higher up was like, you better fucking shut up about that. And it was our friend Glennis.
Yeah, we turned there. The higher up was the woman that destroys records after she leaves her time, has also been sending like Italian mob style emails to universities like, it'd be an awful shame if something happened to that funding if that professor kept talking, running her mouth.
Attachment horseshead.jpg.
It's also mad that they basically said, yeah, you're not allowed to identify the data. It's been de-identified.
They tried to make...
You're doing the wrong thing by... And he's gone, no, but anyone could do this. And they're going, well, stop doing it.
And they shouldn't either.
Yeah. I'm just going to leave all of this sensitive money here, just on the footpath, This is taxpayers' money. Just going to leave it here on the footpath. Nobody touch it.
It's
I
actually-
can just take some.
That's very much, if you look in like estimates, when people are being grilled about corruption stuff, they're always like, did you do this? And the response is, it's illegal to do that. Like, yeah.
Again, it's the purity stuff. It's just like,
we're
you
fucking asking.
you can't accuse me of committing a crime. You wouldn't do that, would you? You'd be saying I'm some sort of criminal. So all I'm going to do is just remind you that it's illegal to do that.
Or
Hey.
the classic thing where they go, can we get an estimate on, how many people you've murdered or something? And they go, well, we can't give you that because it might make us look bad. And it's like, well, it won't make you look bad unless you've done something wrong.
Oh, yeah. That was exactly what Rachel Stewart was talking about. She was interviewing Anne Rushton, who's the senator who was being interviewed about Centrelink, basically. And Rachel Stewart asked, should our social security system not cause harm to another person? And Anne Rushton said, I'll have to take that on notice. Because her defense was like, oh, there's legal, implications of harm, so we've got to be very careful in answering this question. It's like, if you're doing the right thing, I don't think, like...
By harm, do you mean poor people? By people, do you mean poor people?
Yeah, but the thing is, there should be a legal definition for harm, and you should be confident that your social service is not doing harm.
Yeah.
But also, if it is, then the people involved, you should be happy to have them prosecuted. The whole point of the social security net is so people don't get harmed. So if harm is happening because of the way it's set up or the way it's being administrated, you should criminally prosecute those people doing that harm.
Yep.
Bushfires, climate change causing bushfires.
Every time we talk about climate change, I find myself being like, there's more shit, it's the same shit, and it's getting worse. But honestly, no one else seems to talk about this enough, so we gotta. We wish we didn't gotta, but we gotta. The Morrison government has said that they are planning to break a commitment to fund an international collaboration into researching what's required to shift to a zero emissions future. Now, and we'll put a link in here. They're going to stop at this $20 million international collaboration fund. Now, this is despite them saying that their entire strategy is researching technologies and strategies to reduce emissions, which is what this is. So, yeah, I mean, obviously they don't give a crap, but
I can see an argument being made that they're trying to get Australia to be carbon neutral by 2050, not other countries, Lang. So surely maybe this is one of those things where we can just focus on climate change internally, just for the country.
But it's a collaborative thing. And so this is working with people and researchers from all over the world who already have all the technology and can just give it to Australia.
And they announced this in the same week as the Bushfire and Natural Hazards Research Centre announcing that they have no more funding and
That
they're
is
going to close down.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's just...
Let's emphasize that a bit more.
Yes, we gotta. We don't wanna, but we gotta.
The bushfire and what was it?
The Bushfire and Natural Hazards Research Centre, so specifically the centre that focuses on the modelling that can predict how bushfires are going to affect Australia both now and in the future, that has no more money and they're not giving it any more money and it's closing this year.
Well, in the defense of the government, like, we're ignoring that advice anyway.
Yeah. I mean, it
I
is
guess we don't
currently
need it.
wasted money.
At least they're being fucking honest about it now. It's like, we're not using you.
Look, we ignored that advice for years and the bushfire still happened. So what is it even for?
Also, let's be clear, the Bushfire and Natural Hazards Research Centre did make them look pretty silly by pointing out all those bushfires they were ignoring.
So I guess if you don't have the facts there, they can't get in the way.
I mean, this is classic fascism. Once you get rid of the people reporting on your bad stuff, you can get away with more bad stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
First, they came for the Bushfire and Natural Hazards Research Centre funding, and then they came for the socialists.
First, they came for the Bushfire National Hazard Research Centre, and I started a podcast.
And then
And I
they
will not
came
shut
for-
up about it.
Then they came for the podcasts. They're taken
And
a
we
while
never
on that
heard
one.
the end of it. Just podcasting from the gulags.
Then they came for the podcast and everyone was like, oh, well,
Silver lining to
you
fascism.
gain some, you lose some.
Which podcasts?
No, I think podcast is a state of mind. There's so many groups of white men that should just be rounded up on the street, and it's just like,
they don't even have microphones. They're just podcasters by nature.
Yeah, you can see
Yelling
a
on the
podcaster.
street.
Yeah, you can see a podcaster. It's the color of their shorts.
Then they came for the podcasts, and I was like, "Oh, you coming for podcasts? What podcasts are you coming for?" I've been coming for podcasts recently.
I can recommend you some great ones you should come for.
They have mattress ads all the way through them.
And then they came for the mattresses because honestly, those are some savings.
We're too deep in the riff. What are we talking about?
What was the other fun part? I mean, this is like sort of like corruption and the Bushfire Relief Fund together at last. The relief grants. Apparently, less than half of the 1,107 applications have been approved to date. And this is out of a $2 billion fund.
Right.
Apparently, only 5 farmers and small businesses have so far actually received emergency bushfire loans from the federal government, equal to about $400,000.
Now let's point. That's almost $500,000. That means they've got about 2,000 times that amount to still go.
Remember how we talked about what $1 billion is in a previous episode? Well, they've only used a very, 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 very tiny amount.
9 zeros. They've used 5 of them. Each zero is 10 times bigger than the last zero.
Really?
I absolutely bet that it's going to come out that they're like, "Oh no, we absolutely have spent all of that $2 billion. It's in an indexed fund that's going to make like 20% back over the next 30 years, and we'll spend that on bushfires."
Angus Taylor's got it covered.
Yeah, yeah. We're gonna find out that they've spent it on some stuff, and it was a committee that was chosen by Fiat that like some rich friends of theirs are now on a board of directors going, you know what? These people should get bushfire funding. And it's like, well, we've got the $25 left over and we'll split it amongst the rest of the farmers.
And we were talking about estimates before. So the Labor Senator Murray Watt, he actually has argued so far that the expenditure for the fund doesn't actually exist because it doesn't appear in any official papers.
Yeah.
And the Bushfire Recovery Agency Deputy Secretary, Abigail Bradshaw, she called the fund notional. So
The Notional Fund.
yes, so there's a lot of questions now about whether this $2 billion is actually penciled in.
Incredible.
Because let's be clear, the purpose of the fund, the notional fund, was just so the Morrison government could say, look what we're doing. They go, look, here's $2 billion. Nobody kind of has to go, all right, let's see the check. No, because they've said their bit. They got their press release. They make a big song and dance, and then they hope people ignore it because now there's coronavirus.
$2 billion is the new thoughts and prayers.
I really
we're
enjoy-
committing $2 billion to the victims of gun violence. We're committing $2 billion to climate change. Just, you get $2 billion, you get $2 billion. Can we have the money? Whoa!
It's notional.
No, we've committed the money. We're going to do it.
Yeah, we've committed the funds. So where are the funds going? No, we've committed them.
We've just committed to it. Like how you commit to a wife or an obligation. It's just a nice way of saying, I won't, but I want you to like me.
Haven't heard much from Jeff Bezos' $10 billion fund recently either.
No.
Anyway, so the government has also announced a coronavirus fund. We'll see what that happens. There is a rumour that maybe the bushfire funds will go to the coronavirus fund. There's a rumour that neither of them have any funds. There's a rumour that until someone does something, a fund is not actually a meaningful thing.
What's a fund?
It's a notional concept.
It's a bank account with a name on it. Like
Angus Taylor.
Yeah, if you set up a $2 billion fund, you've just gotten $2 billion of the national budget and put a name on it. You haven't spent it. You haven't done anything.
This is starting to sound like my little savings accounts that I have. So I've got one for rent, and I've got one for my regular savings. I've got one for just any fuck off money that I want later. And Angus Taylor's just moving around that $2 billion into the rent account.
100%. 100%.
Until you spend your car fund on a car, it's not a car yet.
Because I would not be surprised if we hear some really rotten stuff coming out about this, about the $2 billion going back into government projects or whatever, because they are for no good reason obsessed with a surplus still. Even though we've had the bushfire horrors and we've had the coronavirus, they were so stoked on potentially having a $5 billion surplus, and then they said, $2 billion. They made Notion a few months ago about how that's I don't care about a surplus. Don't care about a surplus at all. We're going to take 2 of those $5 billion from that surplus and put it into bushfire stuff. And now they're just trying to hold on to it for as long as possible. Like, how much do you really need, bud?
Tell them the bushfires are encroaching on the surplus. They're getting closer to the surplus. Protect the surplus.
The thing that annoys me about that is there's also some coverage of lefty commenters being like, oh, where's your surplus now? Oh, they promised the surplus, but it looks like they're not going to hit it. It's like, well, fucking good.
Yeah.
Because a surplus is, I'm just going on record here, the stupidest fucking idea that any government can ever do. I'm paying you my taxes.
Yep.
And then I'm pledging that I will keep them and not do anything with them. I'm just going to put them. They're going to be my number and not your number. That's what a surplus is.
But appealing to the idea, like it appeals to people's base ideas that, you have a surplus. That means you have savings in the bank. It's like the most cynical way to view it.
It's running
and that's what they're
It also doesn't
government
work.
like it's a family budget,
Yeah.
which is like if you're a family and you spend that money, then the shop has that money. But if you're a government and you spend some money, you're giving it to the people in your population. Your population still has that money. It doesn't. You can't spend money as a government.
Yeah, and you're giving them their money back. That's my fucking money. Spend it. A surplus is a government saying, look how much of your money we've still got.
Yeah.
You should not have a fucking cent of it. It should go back into the fucking community.
So here's the thing. It's not tax evasion. It's just decentralizing the surplus. Instead of the government holding on to the whole surplus, I'm just going to hold on to my bit of the surplus. That way it benefits all of us.
It's fucked. So anyway, actions for this week. Stop paying taxes.
I mean, the upside of a surplus is that some of that money's now not going to like denying refugees healthcare and like fighting foreign wars and all kinds of stupid shit that
Or
the
Angus
government
Taylor's
does
back
actually
pocket.
do
Now-
with the taxes that we pay.
We probably should say this is satire and we are not specifically endorsing not paying your taxes. It gets complicated.
It goes
We
like
may
this.
or may not endorse it later.
You should pay your taxes, but if you don't, you're morally in the right.
Yeah, legally wrong, morally right.
Yeah.
It's 100%.
Like,
yeah.
Absolutely, pay your taxes. You got to pay your taxes. If you don't, you're going to heaven.
I'll take it. I'll take it on.
Prez.
I'll take it on notice that you have to pay your taxes legally speaking. Yes, 100%.
Real quick wrap up on a few more climate change things. Angus Taylor keeps popping up because he's the energy and resources guy who loves to steal money from taxpayers. Just saying it how it is.
Not saying that he does it, just
No,
saying that he loves it.
likes to. He may or may not have.
When he thinks about it, he thinks good. Whether or not he does do that,
Although,
It would be illegal if he did.
yeah.
it would be so illegal if he did. So he mustn't be doing it. But
And if he had, we would estimate that it's about $93 million that he would have liked to have hypothetically
on paper, if
stolen from taxpayers.
I was Angus Taylor, I'd do a bunch more off paper. But
Yeah. The more harmful,
I can't tell him how to live his life.
the more harmful thing that he does is he wants to do things like keep the little coal power Liddell. It's the name of the coal power station open.
He's got a tiny little coal power station.
I bet he fucking does. But he wants to keep a big one open until 2026. And this is one that was meant to close back in like friggin' 2015 or it's meant to close in 20. They keep pushing forward
scheduled it
the
to
closure.
close. They scheduled it to close in 2022.
Yeah.
In 2015. So in 2015, they announced, "Hey, guess what, everybody? Climate change is real. So we're going to start closing down our coal-fired power stations." Little is one of those, and so they're not doing that. In fact, last year they extended that deadline out to 2023 instead of 2022.
Now, this doesn't stand in isolation. Basically, this is most of the coal power stations, or a lot of them that we have in this country, are pretty old. They're pretty shit. They are very polluting. They're not efficient. And most of them were meant to have been closed down or meant to get closed down soon. They keep pushing them forward. Like Hazelwood was meant to close down long before it did. It keeps getting pushed forward kind of past the point that it's economical just because it's a coal-y, status quo-y kind of thing. And then when it finally does close, because they've never done any real planning for when it's getting closed or committing to slowly like transitioning away from it, something like Hazelwood closes with a bang.
Yeah.
And all of those workers kind of suddenly find themselves without that job that they had because the government didn't effectively plan for closing it. They kept pushing the problem forward and not addressing it.
A 2015 government says, in 2023, we're going to close this power station. And then they all spend 8 years not doing anything. And then they're like, well, we're going to push out that deadline because how could we have seen this coming? It's like, well, look, you've got to, when you make a commitment to do a thing, you've got to plan for the effects of that. And that's always when they're saying like, oh, we've got this renewable energy target for 2050. That means nothing until they're doing things now, because we know how the government operates when they make a future deadline for themselves, which is we made the deadline, we ignored the deadline for the whole time. Now it's the deadline, we're extending the deadline every fucking time.
Yeah, it's another example of them doing that recently is it's been revealed that they haven't done any economic modelling on the impact of climate change since 2013.
That is slightly untrue.
Ooh.
Well, no, it's so they were asked when did you do
Last do it.
economic shock? So it's not that it's not that the last time they did it was in 2013. It was they definitely haven't done it since 2013. And the time that they actually last did it, they took on notice. So it's, have you done any since 2013? No. Have you done any before 2013? Maybe.
Yeah.
So the best case scenario
Yeah.
is 2013. 7 years ago was the last time they modelled for climate change.
It was under the Morrison or Turnbull governments. Did you do any? No. What about the Abbott government? Maybe. So it's 2013 if Tony Abbott did that modelling.
Which,
Otherwise, it's pre-Tony Abbott.
yeah. The government, honestly, they should be doing modelling, but they haven't done modelling. A lot of other people have done modelling.
Yep.
The models are all there. And the models all say the government's doing a garbage job and the government is ignoring those models.
But whenever the government says there's the economic climate, the costs of climate change will be blah, 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 they have not checked since at least 2013. They haven't even checked. So when they're saying that, they are making that up.
Yeah.
They're making it up.
And honestly, they talk about the costs of the solutions. They never say, what is this going to cost in terms of barrier reef jobs or anything like that.
Yeah.
Do you
Sorry,
think-
family, we're not getting food this week. Do you have any idea how much food costs? We can just stop doing the groceries. Like that, we're saving hundreds.
Do you think that in their current modelling and in the budgets that they've had and in any of the researched and costed talking points that they've got about the transition to gas and to the everything else, that they're using pre-2013 climate change modelling that was done back then?
Oh, for sure.
To say that we have to go to gas
Honestly.
because solar panels cost $900 a panel.
Yep.
Because
Yeah.
when we did this in 2011, they were heaps more expensive than now.
Yep.
Honestly, they're not even going by that because those models, even though they solar is so much cheaper than we ever did expect, those models still had we should be ramping down, we should be ramping this up, we need to be moving off these things. All of these coal plants that were predicted and planned to close that kept getting pushed forward. They're not running off any real numbers when they make these judgments because lots of real numbers are out there. The gas thing, actually, I read something quite good today that Australia's current gas power plants, of which we have a number, they're not a major source of our power, but they are significant, are only running, for the last 2 years or so, have only been running at about 30% capacity and at most 60 or 70% capacity. Now, the government is also saying right now, we need more gas power plants to meet demand. No, they really, really don't.
Yeah, we
they
just
could be
increase capacity.
tripling their demand on average and still have plenty
So
of
they just want to
capacity.
build a gas plant just for the sake of it.
Exactly. Now, the current gas plants, honestly, are more than we need, and there is absolutely no decent modelling that shows we're going to need more gas because we can effectively jump straight to renewables. All of the reliable modelling, and we'll give you some links, is predicting that our gas use is dropping quite quickly.
Just the whole government's just we need more power. I guess we'll build more gas plants. That's the whole thought that goes into the economic modelling. Anything that any Liberal MP ever says, just remember that it's the words of a mendacious fucking idiot. The end.
I was going to say, a mendacious fucking idiot looking after his future job prospects as some sort of industry leader in the fossil fuel industry.
That industry's going to collapse. They're not even looking after their own interests. They're just stupid as shit and they all suck and they're all evil.
Our shout out this week is to the Floodcast from Flood Media in Brisbane. They're also a regular political podcast. At the moment, they have this really good reading series about what capitalism is and what a socialist future might look like.
Oh, neat.
So tune in. I think they're really great.
The actions, buy the amount of toilet paper that you need and not any more than that. Get into the habit of not touching your face and washing your hands regularly. It's not that this will prevent you from ever getting coronavirus, but it will slow down the spread of coronavirus so that health services will be less impacted by everybody getting it once. And it's just, it's good hygiene. Wash your vegetables. Have a shower. Get out of the mud, you fucking pig.
Doritos are not a vegetable.
Thanks for listening to Not Good Enough for another week. You can find us all over the internet at Not Good Pod. Go to the website for all the show notes, notgoodpod.com, and send us an email. Let us know what you think. notgoodpod@protonmail.com. Not Good Enough is recorded on the lands of the Kulin Nation. We want to pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging and reiterate yet again that sovereignty was never ceded.